There is something in every one of you that waits, listens for the sound of the genuine in yourself. And if you cannot hear it, you will never find whatever it is for which you are searching. And if you hear it and then do not follow it, it was better that you had never been born. You are the only you that has ever lived. Your idiom is the only idiom of its kind in all of existence. And if you cannot hear the sound of the genuine in you, you will all your life spend your days on the ends of strings that somebody else pulls. There is in you something that waits and listens for the sound of the genuine in yourself. And sometimes there's so much traffic going on in your mind, so many different kinds of signals, so many vast impulses floating through your organism that go back thousands of generations, long before you were even a thought in the mind of creation, and you are buffeted by these. And in the midst of all of this, you have got to find out what your name is. Who are you? How does the sound of the genuine come through to you? Oh, here, take this.
Thank you for I feel ready now.
Good. You lit the chalice. You get Howard Thurman.
I know, yeah. Draw the circle wide, Howard Thurman.
We know how to butter people up. So, Kathryn, thanks again for being here. We start our dialogues each time with this sort of broad question of why dialogue? Why is dialogue important? What does dialogue mean to you in your own tradition, your own practice of life or teaching or whatever, however you bring that out? And it's just a way for us to kind of ground in the reminder of the container that we're creating today. So for you, kind of, why is dialogue important?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for this invitation. It's great to be with you all this morning. Thank you also just for who you are. Who you are comes through in who Nic is, and he is a gift in my classroom and to our school. So thank you all for that, for your ministry here. And I think dialogue, I'll go to the classroom. Dialogue is where we get to find out more about ourselves and others. It's how we grow, when we can rest just a minute, and when who we are and what we believe and what others, who they are and what they believe is not a zero-sum game, when that can be a possibility, it just opens up this space of a spark, of curiosity, of going, kind of having something, understanding something in a new way. Just feels like such an exciting, it's something I love. It's exciting to me. It's why I love teaching and being in the classroom and learning. So dialogue is how that openness is created and sustained.
Thank you. And I was, of course, as anyone drives over on a Sunday morning in negative 10-degree weather, listening to an audio book, Pedagogy of the Oppressed by Paulo Freire, because that's a page-turner. But one of the great things about this seminal work is that it talks about, like the chapter I was on, about the teacher-student relationship, and how there's such a style in Western and just kind of capitalist kind of notions of the student as sort of a repository, a depository of knowledge, and then it's the teacher's job to just put stuff in, the student to just receive it meekly, and there's not actually any humanizing that's going into it. And so I think the type of dialogue we're talking about is pushing back against just accepting everything at face value and finding yourself in it, finding the genuine within that piece of information, so that you can really say, oh, not just what is the capital of Indiana, but what does it mean for that to be the capital? What happens in a capital? Why does that matter? Like, what does it mean to be on the outskirts from a capital? Not just Indianapolis. That's the answer, right? Is it the answer? Can I get an A? So I think the dialogue is where the teacher, at its best, brings. Do I get it? Does it? It brings out that deeper next question, third question, fourth question, into that deeper knowing. So hopefully we'll have some more conversation back and forth, and then as you see later in the service, we'll have some opportunities for questions and comments from all of you. So start thinking about what's coming up for you. As you can see from the title of every dialogue has a little bit of a topic overarching, and the big topic I've been interested for some time since starting this dialogue series is the relationship between Unitarian Universalism and Christianity. Because I think for a lot of Unitarian Universalists, there's a complex relationship or confused relationship or difficult relationship with Christianity because of its relationship historically to Christianity, but in many congregational Unitarian settings, sometimes far removed from a theological Christian grounding. And so the question is, as we all kind of come in here with all of our lived experiences and our current day identities, how do we relate to Christianity today? And is there any limitations or gaps in our ethics towards Christianity versus Hinduism, versus Buddhism, versus other traditions that maybe we have different experiences? So it's important for me always to talk about, well, where is Christianity in our conversation of interfaith? Beyond the campus as well, but just in our own congregation. Where is there space for people who are interested in Christianity or wanting to figure out how does Christianity play, what values shape my life in it? That's something that I hope today can help bring up, because not talking about it doesn't help. And so having Kathryn here, who's one of the people who's not working on Sunday mornings usually, because when I'm trying to find people to dialogue with, a lot of those ministers are working on Sunday, so it was really difficult. So I was really glad you were available. So we do this thing called a high five. It's very, I like my little thing, high five, because we each do 5 things, and get it? High five, back and forth, around a question, a shared question. To get deeper into it before we take our offering. And so the prompt today is, how has Christianity influenced your particular worldview today? How has Christianity influenced your particular worldview today? And spoiler, if it isn't in the description, Kathryn is Christian and I'm not Christian. But it'll be an interesting piece of information to understand. How has Christianity influenced your worldview today? So Kathryn, would you like to start with your first one?
Sure. So my first one is that I have never known a world that wasn't Christian. I grew up in a very Christian family. I've been baptized, this sort of a joke that became a little bit of a theological query in seminary. I've been baptized 3 times. You're not supposed to have done that, which I didn't know until I was confronted with it as a theological problem.
That's like Aflac insurance. It closes the gap,
right.
In case you need a little extra.
I got sprinkled, and then I was like, no, go all the way, all the way, and then just go again one more time, just in case.
The little donut.
Yeah. So Christianity has been the lens through which I have seen the world, from growing up just from Western North. I was born in Eastern North Carolina and grew up in Western North Carolina, in not homogenous cities, but with some that had majority Christian of different kinds. I would say in Western North Carolina, it certainly had more of a evangelical or fundamentalist bent to it. And I was really raised in Western North Carolina in a Southern Baptist church. And so that was really a part of every rhythm and pattern of my life. And not just for me, but I had a very large extended family in Western North Carolina. And for all of us, if they were Presbyterian or Methodist or Baptist. So there's this way that the rhythms of my life have always kind of been in that flow. There's also this little piece of Christianity where it's like you're not supposed to say that you're always been Christian because it's a conversion experience. So I want to table that for just a minute, because I think that naming just sort of the patterns that are the most familiar to us, that are in our habitus, that are in the ways we know how to move in the world, I think that's important. And so really that's my first worldview, is that I both do think I made a choice about it, but it's also been the way I've always known.
Thank you. So similar to you, I've only known Unitarian Universalism as my home faith, my home growing up like an infant. We do the baby dedication rather than baby baptism. But similarly, but because Unitarian Universalism is not the normative kind of religious identity, I've always been around Christians, including in my family. And there's been really meaningful Christian relationships that have not soured my relationship to Christianity, specifically my grandma, my mom's mom, who I've spoken about here in the past, who was a very wonderful church lady in her United Church of Christ in Milwaukee, and would teach Sunday school into her seemingly 70s. I don't know all the stories. She would be kind of just so helpful. I've told stories about how she would have me over for sleepovers when I was, 6 or 7, and sing to me to sleep, little Christian hymns. And, for me, I was just like, wow, that's different than what I get on Sunday morning, but it's just so loving. And I look back to those memories really strongly. My aunt, who's also United Church of Christ, my mom's sister, has been involved in the district level and really involved in a lot of things. And she was a big proponent of this summer family church camp, United Church of Christ, up in northern Milwaukee or northern Wisconsin, and we would go every year. And it was just, we went to a UU summer camp, and then we went to a Christian summer camp, and so it was kind of just oh, well, I'm not Christian, but I really like these people, and we learn about these stories, and we get to, there was even some reacting out certain passages, and it's just fun, and then you get to go play volleyball and swim, and I was just wow, man, I kind of like this. So even though Unitarian Universalism is my home base, I had these early positive experiences that said, oh, Christianity has a lot of loving values and teachings and stories that people I love care about, and that was important to me. Wow. What would your second one be?
So the second one would be the first time that I was challenged with the fact that that not everybody liked Christianity. And I was a religion major in undergrad, and I was in college, and it was one of the very first days of getting to know people on my hall, and we're there, and somebody said, oh, what do you want to study? Why are you here? And I said, oh, I want to study religion, and I want to be a missionary. And that had gotten only affirmation and up until that moment of my life. And this person who had gone to be a very dear, good friend just straight looked at me and went, oh my God, missionaries are terrible. Why would you do that? Why would you ever think that was okay? And I was like, oh, I don't know. I mean, what do you know that I don't know, And the language of colonialism, that wasn't in my worldview at all. This was not something that had entered into my kind of choice in this. For me, this was really the only avenue for women to be in ministry in Southern Baptist churches, and it's a whole other kind of history around that. But, that to me had felt like the most, the biggest, most meaningful way I could live out my faith. And then to have that bump up against with someone who'd had very negative experiences with Christianity really was one of the first kind of moments for me I'll just name of college being this, of unraveling, of meeting folks who are from really different backgrounds, who'd had very different experiences, very negative experiences with Christianity, and my own, and then me kind of starting to be I don't know that I like all these Christians either. Or what I believe, a lot of a really important challenge, I think, happened. I got to meet a lot of people from different backgrounds who were of faith, of no faith, or ardent atheists. And that moment so I'll say that worldview of bumping up against folks who brought that critique, but didn't No, but didn't close me off. I guess I'll say, like, as an 18-year-old kind of sitting there, I appreciate that she was like, okay, well, I don't really like that, but let's go eat lunch together, like, and we grew. I mean, her, and so I appreciate sort of, I don't know that it was dialogue necessarily, but it became a friendship, and us to be able to talk about that.
Well, I'll go to college too. I always like going second because I'm like, I don't have to prepare. I just think of you're bringing up great memories. So in college, I also was a religion major, and one of the big things that did was to tell me there's so much to learn about these world religions, and it's not just like what you like. There's so much like history and culture and ethics and how the politics of that whole region unfolded and things like that. So it really gave me a new layer to Christianity that I didn't always, I couldn't appreciate as a young kid at my grandma's house for a sleepover, right? So it's just like, again, as we get older, we can start seeing more layers. And that was really big because it also made it that if there's multiple layers to this religion, there's likely multiple layers to this religion and that one. And that it's not like, oh, well, one's simplistic and one's very complicated system of belief and things like that. That feels like, well, how's that true? So there had to be some parity in regards to the depth that could be mined, which then out in the world, if there's any experience like missionary bad, then it's like, well, wait a minute, like, is there nuance to that? Maybe that is universally true. And maybe there's some like things that need that back to that different kind of pedagogy. Like, let's talk about that more and really understand what are the impacts of colonialism and Christianity and things like that, and aid organizations and things like that and all that. So I would say just in general, the academics turn from just being an interested young person to being an interested young adult was a big shift for me.
So I'll build on that a little bit and say the other thing that happened in college was that I learned about different kinds of Christians that I wanted to pattern my life about differently. So while there was this critique, I was in a history class, and we were studying about the populism. But we also read a book called The Children by David Halberstam, and it's about really how young the folks in the civil rights movement were when they began began this activism. But also the centrality of their faith for them. Now that might seem like a given, but for me it was a revelation that faith could be the thing that made you march for justice, that made you insist on your own humanity, that made you, compelled you to fight white supremacy and racism that you saw in your city. I took classes on liberation theology, and that was nothing I'd ever really, couldn't have dreamed of encounter. I think my final class was on types of liberation theologies, and I reflected just on from the moment of saying I wanted to be a missionary until this last class of just such a broadening for me. So I think I would say, what has challenged expanded my worldview, I have been changed by and encountered by different kinds of Christians. And so it's, you meet, not everyone is the same. And well, yeah, duh, but it does change you to meet others who have practiced this thing that feels very familiar to you, but you learn about it in a new way. And for me, that really set a trajectory that has been really important to me, that I feel like I've wanted to continue to try to be in. That's the trajectory and the place my heart and my life are oriented towards.
Your last class was on types of liberation, and this semester I'm taking a class with Dr. House on theories of liberation. Interesting. Mm-hmm. I would say my third one we're on relates to the decision to go to a Catholic university for undergrad and a Christian seminary for seminary. What? Meadville's right down the street. University of Wisconsin-Madison, go Badgers, or whatever. Why didn't I do those things? Well, one, they put me on the wait list at Wisconsin, and that felt great as a younger brother. But no, it made me realize that if I'm going to learn about religion as a non-Christian living in a predominantly Christian nation, I need to understand Christianity. I need to understand this water I'm swimming in. It's fun going to Meadville for my doctorate, but it's sort of like, woo, where are you? High five. Fist bump, and it's like, kind of like, that's not what the world's like, you know what I mean? Like, there's some limitations there. So going to a Catholic school, which is also very urban and engaged across the metropolis of Chicago, and then Chicago Theological Seminary, it's sort of like, oh, okay, like these are my neighbors. A lot of my colleagues, like I'm going to have more Christian colleagues in relationship in a 20-minute radius than you colleagues, and so how do I really get to know these people? And so I think it's really important to like not seclude yourself away from the cultural dominance or normative kind of things, even if there's real ethical concerns around some behaviors or legislative decisions and all that stuff. Like, you don't have to be like, yeah, so I think it's really important to kind of know your context and be willing to go there and then find your grounding in the midst of that discomfort.
So, I was thinking about pluralism being something that's really important to you, and in thinking about kind of the different types of Christianity that I was exposed to, different histories of Christianity and Christian theology, one of the other kind of interesting things that happened in that is I did decide to pursue like theological education and go and get my Master of Divinity degree, but I had already sort of left the Southern Baptist world behind in very significant ways, but it was still like there were deep and still are connections to a community and to people I love in that world. And then as sort of I was pursuing, but I knew that wasn't where I was landing. I knew that wasn't the world I was in. So I ended up going to Boston University School of Theology, which is a Methodist school. And the point I'm going to make here while I'm spiraling a little bit is that ecumenical life, so different types of Christianity, have always been really important to me from both because of rejection that I experienced as a woman in a very patriarchal expression of Christianity. And because I love it. I love different expressions of Christianity. I learn from them. So there are ways where people are like, oh, like, why do you care about ecumenical life? Or you're kind of writing about how you would teach in an interfaith or interreligious environment. Or when I'm reflecting on what it is to be a Christian professor in a UU school, it's really like how I've learned to live my faith and teach. I wasn't, there have been moments where where I was not going to be able, where any woman was not going to be able to do something in a tradition that was Southern Baptist, have become very acute for me. Very sort of particular moments of rejection when I saw lots of other men get things, and I knew that I had maybe been in school the longest, and maybe some of them, could be my students, but that wasn't the invitation. And just like the fire that it lit in me to want that not to be the case for the people I love and my students. And so I think about my sort of embrace of ecumenical Christianity has been because I've been to Methodist schools. My first job was at an Episcopal church. I joke that I'm a B+ Baptist because I did get a B+ in Baptist polity in seminary, and I did not get that in other classes. And so I was like, well, I'm just not even that good at being a Baptist anyway. Just like, I don't have to worry about it. But I got to take classes with Catholics at Boston College, and then to think even not just Christian, but pluralist. I've gotten to travel and have collegial relationships with people from different faith backgrounds and get to see how just the richness of the life of other, how other people are living lives as religious people or people of faith. And so I think just it's, I'll say kind of this both move of being said to, like, you're not going to be able to do this here, has kind of annoys me enough to really be appreciative of other things, but also just being, my own education, my own training, my own kind of being a minister and being a theologian has been in a very diversely religious space by choice.
I was going to talk about something else, and then he started talking about this, and now I'm going to talk about this. So ecumenicalism, ecumenism, we have the Ecumenical Society of Columbus, Love Chapel, all that stuff. I didn't draw this connection earlier in my life until this very moment. So Christianity is still teaching me that perhaps my move towards pluralism is through ecumenism, ecumenical kind of relationships, because I needed to be able to see the pluralism within a religion before I could really understand the pluralism beyond one religion. So the working title of my dissertation is Encountering Multitudes. Obviously, multitudes is kind of a nice kind of reference to some scriptural passage, but it's also a nice Walt Whitman piece around the internal contradictions and multitudes within oneself. But I wonder about whether ecumenism is that reminder of the multitudes within this living tradition of Christianity, of which Unitarianism and Universalism and the kind of little tributaries kind of flowed and kind of eventually met up and said, hey, and then they kind of hung out for a while and are still doing great, as you use. But I think that in some ways, while Christendom or Christianity, Christian world can be very fraught at times, has been playing out internal pluralism or ecumenism longer than now we have this idea of figuring out, well, how do Hindus and Christians relate? How do Jews and Muslims relate? They've been working on it for a long time, but you know what I mean? There's a lot of really interesting pieces. So I appreciate that way of thinking, or that jarring in me. What about for your last one?
So for my last one, I was thinking about how my faith has always been outside of the walls of the church too. And part of that, that maybe that the missionary, stuff I've sort of named that was something. As someone who did not think that or imagine that church ministry was an option for her, and I didn't. It's not that I wanted it and it wasn't there. And then when I did want it and it wasn't there, I was mad about it for another reason. But when I think about that, to be a person of faith is really about how you love your neighbors. And to me, that has always, I always loved, service projects and getting to know the people in my community. I loved working in summer camps where we did construction in neighborhoods, or, worked with kids. I helped start a food program at my congregation that now kind of has been around for a very long time and has grown into a food bank that does just tremendous work that I was a part of the very, very early start of. But that kind of work that is not confined to a building is Christianity to me. Absolutely the things that are what happen in worship, or what happen on at particular times that we might say are church times. But for me, and I'll use this language of discipleship, I feel faithful. I've been deeply connected to my faith outside of church spaces, outside of kind of those very set moments. It's been when I've been just in my local community and things that had nothing to do with Christianity, or really challenging what a church can be, what its mission can be, what its, what are the things that the people are doing when they're being Christian. I think we're going to talk about some of those things that are pretty violent and awful, but there are also those. I was formed by getting to see people who were really invested in loving and really creatively just being in solidarity with their neighbors in a lot of different ways and creating partnerships in their neighborhoods to care for people, to care for vulnerable people. And that has been a really important thing to me.
I would say the last thing is with Christianity is that, I kind of said it earlier with the context in which we live, is that interfaith is not a way to get away from Christianity, which I think can sometimes be for some Unitarian Universalists. It allows us in some ways to cultivate the kinds of external partnerships that we want and avoid the ones we don't want. I think the reality for me is that Christianity is so diverse in how it has unfolded, and being in a town like Columbus, Indiana, or Southern Indiana, this region, it's really a fool's errand to try to really expect efficacy and impact and just kind of avoid Christianity, avoid the partnerships that are possible, the healing that's possible, the leveraging of resources in this community that are possible, to really invest in the kinds of co-created environments of progressive value that are still possible in Southern Indiana. So I think it's really hard work, but it requires us to find the ways to build relationships that feel meaningful, in the right way. We triage strategies, and we figure out relationships that are close at hand, the ones that are, well, that's really high, up there fruit or low-hanging fruit. So it's not all about trying to go for the most difficult relationship. Let's have a forum on reproductive justice, or let's have a forum on gender and sexual. It's like you might have to start at other places, but there are ways to build, I think, very strong relationships, even when there's theological differences. But it's hard, and I recognize that. And that's part of what today is also, just helping have more of those conversations. So the second section, which usually has a prompt, and then we do that a little bit, and then we move into congregational Q&A, because we always like to hear what's on your minds, questions, comments, things like that, clarifications. One of the things, obviously, on many of our minds is what's going on in Minneapolis right now. Many of you have reached out to me about that. I've heard you all speaking about it. You can't really go anywhere online without hearing about it. The violence, the loss of life, and also the strong resistance, the sustained resistance these last, almost month since Renee Good's death has been really something to behold. And it reminds me just how present this can be in our lives, and then also being down here in southern small town Indiana, what do we do? What do we do about this? Where do we fit into this story? And so this prompt that we'll take in a second will help us to get into that conversation a little bit. But I also came across another quote from Howard Thurman, who we started with today, that I think actually might give us some grounding. And this is a quote from almost 61 years ago, from 1965. It was the day after the Reverend James Reeb, who was a Unitarian minister, was killed in Selma, Alabama, at the march in Selma. He was one of 3 people killed, 2 of which were Unitarians. And Howard Thurman spoke in Boston at a memorial. Reverend Reeb's body was still in Selma, but there was a gathering, and Howard Thurman, who was the dean, I believe at the time, of Boston University's chapel, where Kathryn would later go to study, offered remarks, and this is an excerpt from these remarks, March 12th, 1965. I just invite you to think about it from 61 years ago and from 2 weeks ago. The men who struck him down did not know him. They only knew one thing, that he was a white American like them, and his presence in their midst on such a mission as his was a bitter judgment upon them and the angry world of fear and hate in which they were born and bred. To strike him down was their way to purge themselves of their own agony and to affirm their distortion that the Negro in their midst was a thing, a body, but not a man and a person, even as they. And the rest of us, who were not present on that fateful night, what of us? But were we absent? No. We were there, you and I, but who represented us? The men who delivered the fatal blows and in whose twisted brains and frightened hearts hate ran riot? Did they represent us? Or were we with Jim Reeb and his colleagues? Who spoke for us on that tragic night in Selma, Alabama? And in which voice? Now that Jim Reeb is dead and the terrible drama unfolds before our startled conscience, how may we make atonement? You must find your answer, even as I find mine. And so when I read that, I said, wow, that feels awfully gripping 61 years later. And some of you were perhaps aware of and around more hyper-consciously than some of us. And so it just led me to really kind of feel this question out about how our faith, our respective faith, help us to better understand and live courageously in the midst of violence and other injustices that we face as a society today. So, Kathryn, how does your faith help you better understand and live courageously in the midst of violence and other injustices that we face as a society today?
I think one of the first things it feels important for me to name is that I am a Christian who is just finds this state violence done in the name of white Christian supremacy to be abhorrent. And that is the kind of foundation on which I am moving in this, the way I come to it. There's a couple pieces. There's to have your own faith, this thing that is really deeply meaningful to you, that you have known to be the grounding and source and orienting concern, to use a word from Randy Maddox, of my life. Christianity has been about love. It has been about love to my neighbor. It has been about how I can show God's love and the good, the dignity and the worth of humans, and to watch it be so twisted, to watch it become part of the violence of the state apparatus is its own kind of grief. I don't know what else to call it. Like, it's its own thing. But I've been in that work for a long time. This is not the first time where I've been white, that Christianity aligned with particular forms of Christian nationalism fused with white supremacy has been in the United States for a long time. So this is not its first, it's not the first time. But I think that I am deeply aware of kind of the push of this moment from very powerful places to claim this nation as a Christian one. And so for me as a Christian to say, I don't want this nation to be a Christian one, that's not what Christianity is about, and that's not what a democratic nation is about. So those feel like important, those are important to me. I'm also a Baptist, and part of being Baptist is that we are really committed to the free expression of faith for all persons. That's why we're in it. We're in it because we didn't want to state religion. And so, so there are some things kind of in my own background in that. So there's this piece of watching things happen in the name of Christianity But also, like, they don't get to tell me what it means to be Christian. Like, end of the story. That's what I get to hold on to. And so I am, watching and learning and with my colleagues who are in Minneapolis, who are in so many parts of the United States, and who are joining with so many clergy from and just people of faith, people of goodwill, people who are saying this isn't how I want to live, no matter what my faith background is. Like, that's the Christianity that I know. That's what is important to me. That's what I am imperfectly, but like trying to draw from to be a human in this world right now.
Yeah, I think for me, part of my Unitarian Universalism is trying to hold multiple things at once, multiple things as true and real, including the different emotions I might be holding of anger, of grief, of heartbreak, of hopelessness, helplessness, but also tremendous courage and confidence of the human spirit to rise above this and to collaborate and organize and to remain true to that belief in where we are headed in the long arc, and even in these smaller arcs, and to try to hold all of those at once, and to not just get seduced by one as sort of, this is the way to do it. Just be angry all the time. Judson spoke about this a few weeks ago, about not allowing his anger and rage to just kind of consume him, but to find ways to continue to practice inner peace and modeling that in the world as well, to find that both andness. So I think part of it is to see the wholeness of the human life here and in the people I serve, to try to find spaces for those as we are trying to figure out what does it mean to be in solidarity with folks who are on the front lines, in the streets, things like that. And what are those complementary roles that we can play instead of just getting in a big bus and going up there and just, staying up there for the next however many months that this is probably going to be sustained, because we need to have that. I think part of it also is looking clearly at what is happening and trying to put that into some perspective, not to do away with the hope or hopelessness, spectrum, where should I be today, but to appreciate what those moments of stories and solidarity and kindness. And I saw some real move away from even language around ICE or immigrants to really a universal shift towards neighbors. That it's not about this policy or this part of the department, but that this is about neighbors, and shifting the whole consciousness around what we think about the other person as neighbor, not neighbor that is on permanent residency or this or that. It's just neighbor. That is a powerful shift in our understanding of the anthropology that we live in, and that to me should be noticed. The language we choose matters, and I think Unitarians can sometimes get stuck in language, but I think sometimes the right language can really help us with the next step, the next right step that we make. Are there other things that are coming to mind for you on that?
I'm thinking about the ways that folks who have always lived with precarity in the United States are teaching about solidarity right now, of communities that it's just that the kind of care and concern that is sort of very, very visible right now in somewhere like Minneapolis can happen now everywhere. Neighbors can help neighbors now, those kinds of relationships of, part of the reason March, they've said, we're able to kind of make that call and to do that work, and which Unitarians have been, leading. It was a very powerful force, and it's because they've done a lot of work for a lot of years together. So it didn't just spring up. That there's a preparation that we do that is our daily lives, but it's so that we are already in community. We're already in relationship with the people who we're going to need at every moment. And so, that is So you have those relationships and you're ready. So I think that is, to me, beginning to say, like, what are the local things? I mean, which is part of the beauty of what you all are doing here and have done here. So that's how I think about the other pieces of this now.
I appreciate that, thinking about in our very local context, whether through NAACP or other initiatives, building these networks earlier, before there's major movements of white supremacy kind of influx, weaponized state or things like that, to what are we doing here, including the built environment of pluralism and democratic values, to not underestimate why that work now, the shade of that tree, will be beneficial down the road. But additionally, the thing I was thinking about was that for different people, this moment in time feels different, right? Like you said, like some are like, yeah, get on board. We've been saying this for decades and decades, and we've never left that time frame. And the phrase sometimes, and maybe back to some biblical language, is around asking the rhetorical question, are we currently living in an apocalyptic age, a pre-apocalyptic age, or a post-apocalyptic age? And different people, depending on their social location, might answer differently. They might just be revealing, like the idea of apocalypse being a revealing of what is happening here. For others, it might feel like, oh my God, this emerging storm. And others might say, I've been living in this for a long time, or I'm more in some Octavia Butler novel, and I've been doing this for a long time. And so the reality is that all of us might be awakening to the sun or storm at different places, and how can we offer compassion and care and education to one another so that we are affirmed where we are today and encouraged to where we could be tomorrow, right? So it's not saying you should all have known this already, or we should have been prepared, but to say, okay, this is where we are, and now where are we going to go next? And that includes people within our congregation who are at different places of lived experience and beyond these walls, on this campus, beyond these walls. So it's important to kind of hold that multiple answer of what type of age are we living in, because that might help us, again, to build empathy for one another and hold multiple truths at once. So I really want to bring more voices into the room. I know we're kind of nearing time and things like that, but it's always really nice to have opportunities to offer comment, to offer questions, to offer insights. And I think I saw someone who I was going to ask to move the microphone around. If someone would want to move this microphone around the room, that would be really helpful. And thank you, Sandra. That was actually the person I was thinking about. And so just raise your hand. Again, it doesn't have to be some profound question or statement. It could be a question of any kind or comment, and we'll just take a few before we close out today. I think John has one. And say your name just so we can get to know each other more.
Thank you very much. I appreciate this opportunity to listen, learn, and even express myself, which I don't do very well sometimes. But two things hit me during this conversation, and that was a memory of when I was a young boy, and I was reading a Mad magazine, and I came across the acronym WASP, White Anglo-Saxon Protestant. And that's when I learned that the Ku Klux Klan doesn't even like Catholics. And we were all Catholics growing up at home. And so I realized that I was also being targeted by these angry white Anglo-Saxons, Protestants. The other thing that struck me is I found when I came to Unitarian Universalism how refreshingly non-patriarchal it is. But at the same time, I was struck this morning when I think I was the only one who sang the third verse to that song, Warm Father God.
Yeah,
I was looking at the book instead of the screen. Somebody should have told me we're not doing the third verse. That's probably a trigger for some people. I don't know.
I think it was a technical gap, but maybe not. Maybe not, John. We got you. John got punked. Thank you, John. Yeah, we got Chris over here.
I'm Chris. And I really appreciate this dialogue. I came from a Christian background, like I think a lot of us did. And I think here we kind of work through some of that, but I wonder if we could have more opportunities to have conversations within ourselves to unpack some of the things that we bring with us and the assumptions that we've had. My main takeaway this morning is being reminded that there are so many different kinds of Christianity. It's not just the very narrow slice that I was raised in and resist. And I think that's, really valuable. I've had a conversation this past week with a very young woman who is raised in that very narrow slice. And I don't know, I don't know that I did what I would think well in that conversation. I kind of like to talk with her again. There's no way I'm going to change what she thinks because she hasn't had enough world experience to know anything else. But when I made decisions, I hadn't either. So I don't know. I would like the opportunity for some of us to be able to talk, in a semi-structured way.
We've talked about those kinds of classes, unpacking your religious past and would that be of interest to some folks? You don't have to commit, but if you just kind of show me your little okay, at least a few handfuls, because it can be really helpful. Yeah.
There won't be an altar call.
There will not be an altar call. And the thing we didn't
talk about it.
The thing we didn't talk about is about conversions. You brought that up, and one of the things I feel like in both probably Baptists and UUs is that it's freely chosen. It's a consent. So even if you wanted to change that person, that conversion comes from within that person and not by you. And same with us. And additionally, I think we don't talk so much about conversion here as we talk about transformation, continued personal transformation, collective transformation, which again it does have a shift in meaning, but how are we always continuing to change? We're never the same person. Our faith continues to evolve and change as well. Jan.
Hi, I'm Jan Lucas, and I grew up in a very progressive, pretty radical Episcopalian church outside of Detroit, Michigan. And then as I, grew older, I could not say the Apostles' Creed, basically. I couldn't really adhere to a lot of the tenets of Christianity as I saw them. And so, I've been a searcher all of my adult life, but I have to say I'm just aware of my physical reaction to this whole talk here today, because there are so many things about Christianity that really trigger me, in particular the Catholic Church and its treatment of women, and also the horrible sexual predatory nature that has been revealed over the years, and such lack, really, I think, of accountability. And I just feel like that has to be lifted up into the room here, because there's so many great things, and I know many great Christians, and I guess you kind of mentioned that, Nic, holding multiple realities, and I definitely struggle with that. But I just had to speak to that.
Yeah, I think that's really true, and I think bringing in a question around power and authority and how that's wielded in different denominations within Christianity. What's the risk of not enough checks and balances? Things like that is really true, and the harm and the unhealable harm that can come from that as well should and must be named. Yeah,
and I want to thank you for naming it. And I'll say, I write about evangelical purity culture, which was abstinence teaching, kind of came out of evangelical churches in the 90s and continues. And in that work have come work now with a lot of folks that work at intersections around trauma and are really deeply invested, who are themselves people of faith in trying to hold accountable the folks who are involved in the sex abuse in the Catholic Church and evangelicalism. And it is hard work for them the level of suffering that is there is enormous. But they are also experiencing the pushback and the silencing as people who are speaking out within their own tradition. There's a lot of resistance to accountability. There's resistance to making changes that could just create more safety and justice there. So I only say that because I feel that too really strongly in my own work. This just is despicable, and there hasn't been enough to address this past. That folks feel that there are people within those traditions who it is hard to live as someone who's really committed to something and also have your work be about trying to challenge it. But like that's how you stay faithful. Like their faithful work is like pushing against, the silencing that they're experiencing.
And I think your book manuscript is at the publisher. It's going to take some.
Hopefully
soon. So we'll have to have her back when this purity cult. This. It's because you're creating it for a more popular audience, right? You're shifting your dissertation towards something that is for the masses a little bit, right?
Yeah. So, and to talk about what it means for this, how these ideas around sexuality and gender that really sort of coalesced in the 90s, both have a really long history. And for those of you who know Al, who have worked with Al teaching, that has a really parallel history with abstinence teaching. It came out and was such a good alternative to a lot of the purity culture stuff. But then to also say, like, how are these things showing up now?
Yeah. So we'll have to have her back for a reading and a book signing. Yeah. Maybe we'll take one more.
Yeah, thank you guys for all of that. I just had a question about whether if there is a group or some place where people can meet we talked about wanting to, deconstruct Christianity, but is there also like a social justice group that you guys have here at UU or any other churches that kind of meet? Because I have some people that might be interested in that and kind of...
Well, we'll connect you with Kathleen and Kate and some others. The Environmental Action Committee team work around defending democracy and and then a lot of connections inside and outside the congregation, including outside, like with NAACP and some other initiatives. And again, so the more we start talking about what do I need from a community like this, the more we find some common needs and said, hey, come with me, go here. So it can be things like choir. It can also be things like justice and marching and things like that. So thank you for saying that. This can be that built microcosm of the kind of pluralistic society that we need it to be, and things like that. So thank you, Christy. All right. We'll just take kind of 30 seconds of silence before we take a deep breath. We have some questions up, and then we'll have our closing hymn.
Folks, I hope you'll receive this blessing today, that you would, in this week, as you go from this place, that you would find many opportunities for deep grounding in what is significant to you, what brings you pause, what brings you courage. I hope that there are many opportunities to connect with these folks, with those who are outside these walls in this place. And I hope that in this next week, when you gather together, that you are buoyed by that you are dreaming together for whatever it means to be in this moment. It is good to be with you, and I am blessed, and I send my blessings to you today.